So I'm going to go ahead and show you some exercises that I do to help with their maneuverability on the ground. And the more maneuverable they are on the ground, the more maneuverable they're going to be in the saddle. So when they already know turn on the haunches and side passing and really, you know, letting you have control of where they place their feet on the ground, then they're going to be a lot more comfortable giving you that same control when you're in the saddle. So I'm going to do a little review with her first before we jump into the exercises. First, I'm going to disengage her hindquarters. Good girl, perfect. Good, good girl. Okay, now I'm going to have her front end move. Ideally, her hind will stay still. I'm not going to be really strict about it as long as she doesn't try to walk off, okay? So I've got my right hand is going to be on her halter, and my left hand holding the whip is going to be at her shoulder. Good. And I want her to step over. Good. Good. There you go. Good girl. And then I'll take her the other way. Good. Good. Well done. Good job. Okay, now there's a couple of different backups that we're going to want to do. So the first one is to have her back up with me. And so I'm just going to stand at her head, and my cue is I stomp my feet. You can do what you want, but I find that generally is pretty transferable to wherever you're at on the ground. So I'm going to stomp my feet, say back, and then I'm just going to wave the whip a little bit. Good girl. Good. Good girl. So ideally, I'd like her to just do it off of my cue instead of having to use the whip at all. Back, back. Just give me one little step. Good. Good girl. Good. Okay, one more time. Back, back. Good. Good. Good girl. Okay, now I'm going to have her back away from me. Back. Good. She knows this one a little better. Good girl. One more time. Back. Back. Good. Back. I'm going to ask her for just a few more steps. Back. I don't want her walking off. She's got to go backwards. There. Good girl. Good. And again, you can use whatever cues are going to work best for you. Those are the cues that I like. Ooh. Good girl. So now I'm going to see, this one's a little bit trickier. If from the top of the nose, I can move her backwards and move her hind a little bit. So I'm just going to ask her to just back up a little. Good girl. And then I'm going to tip her head. Good. And see how she moves her hind? Good girl. So this is going to be an important prep for what I call the maze. So just a step or two backwards. Good. And then moving her hind. And I'm waiting for her to cross over. There she goes. Good girl. Well done. So what I have here is 3 poles on the ground, and the 2 on the sides go all the way up to the fence. You could use a fence, or you can have another set of poles there, and then this middle one has plenty of room for her to move through. So I'm just going to walk her in just like a chute. I'm not going to go all the way through the maze. Good. And I'm going to have her stop. Ooh. And I just want her to settle. Good girl. And then I'll have her come around to the other side. And who? Good girl. Good. Who? And so that's one of the things we worked on with her, is that she wouldn't want to stop and just stand. She wanted to kind of stop and swing the hind out, or side pass, or fiddle around, or maybe not stop with you, maybe keep walking a couple steps and then stop. And so that's one of the things we've worked on with her. Good girl. So now I'm going to go through, just go into that first part in the chute again, and then back her out. Ooh. Good. Back. Good. Good girl. Good. So notice how she's wanting to move off to what would be her right. So I'm just going to tip her nose and move her hind the opposite direction just a little bit. Good. Good. Because when I do ask her to back the whole maze, I need her to back straight. Good girl. So then we'll walk through and we'll back an L. And I'd like her to stay up here with me a little bit. She's wanting to drag behind a little. Ooh. Good girl. Good. Good girl. So I'm just going to back her straight, stop, move her hind, and then back her out the rest of the way. Don't try to do your turn and backing at the same time. That's a little bit more advanced. Eventually your horse can get there, but don't do that from the beginning. Good girl. And I'm using just a little press release on the top of her nose for each step. So now I'm going to ask her to move her hind. There she goes. Good girl. Good. So I want her to straighten up a bit though. She's wanting to go right into backing, so I stop her. Ooh. And move the hind a little bit again. Good. I'm not going to let her rush through. I'm going to make her wait and let me position her. So I'll move her hind over another step. There. Good girl. Now we'll back the rest of the way. Not too bad. So she's still a little crooked coming out, but not bad. So I'm going to stay with her until she can move her hind around a little bit. And so I'm tipping her head to her right, which would be my left because I'm facing her. And I want her hind to go out to her left. Good. So not bad with her maneuverability, but she's still wanting to come out a little bit crooked. So we're just going to keep playing with it. And now we're going to go ahead and see though, because she did stay very calm and paid good attention, we're going to go ahead and try to back the whole maze. And she's going to see why it's important for her, good girl, to be a little bit straighter. Ooh, good. Good. Good girl. So now I'll ask her hind. And if she swings her hind too much, then she's going to have a problem with that middle pole. Good girl. Good. So now what I'm going to do is move her shoulders and straighten her up. Good. So you can see all those things that I reviewed with her in the beginning, why it's important to have control of all 4 feet so you can position her. This is just the test. The work was already done with you know, just out in the center working on that stuff. But this is the test if she can do it under pressure with in between the poles. Good girl. So now she needs to move her hind around. Good girl. Good. Ooh. Ooh. Okay, and then I'll move her front. Good. Ooh, I'm gonna make her settle. Good girl. Then, now that she stops here nice, I'll back her out. And I'm going to keep on her. There she goes, starts to straighten out a little bit. Good. So she got a little wiggly through here, so I kept backing her until she kind of straightened out just a little bit. Good girl, well done. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So if you haven't been practicing your maneuvering and leading your horse on their right side, then this is going to be pretty awkward for you and your horse. But it's important that your horse is maneuverable on the ground to both sides, just like in the saddle, how you expect them to be the same on both sides. But I'd like her to stay up here with me, so I'm just encouraging her forward a bit. Ooh. Good. Ooh. And I'm just gonna actually have her just come up here next to me. Good. There you go. Good girl. Ooh. Good. Well done. And it's a little awkward for her. She's not wanting to be so close to me and stay up in her position where she should be. But that's fine. We're just going to work on it. And then I'll ask her to back the chute. And see how crooked she's getting? So I'm going to wait until she'll move her hind around a little. Good. And then I'm going to actually back it up with that front a little. Good girl. And it's not a fight because we've worked on that maneuverability. So she understands when I ask her to move something, she understands what that means. Good. Good. Well done. Good girl. Okay, so now we'll back the L. Good. Good girl. Good. Well done. Good. I'm just going to let her settle. Good girl. Now I'm going to ask that front to take a step over. Good. And straighten her out a bit. Good. Very well done. Good girl. Good job. Ooh. Good girl. Good. Good. Okay, now move the front a little bit so she gets straightened out to the fence. Good girl. Well done. And I really like, this is a big deal for her, how she's settling in between, because she was in the beginning, when you'd wanted her to do something, she'd want to do it all at once and not want to pay attention to the finer details. Good. So I do a lot with her on doing something and then making her stop and stand for a while, and then doing something else, stop and stand. So I'm just going to ask that hind to move over one more time. There. Good. Good girl. Good job. So the other exercise I'm going to show you today is having her stand inside of a hula hoop. Now, a safety precaution, you do want to make sure that it's the kind of hula hoop that does have a part that it will pull apart, or make a cut in it, so that if your horse does kind of freak out and gets it up on their legs or something, it's not going to hobble them or get them hurt or anything. So, you know, worst case scenario, you would rather that the hula hoop come apart, okay? So what I'm looking for is for her to step her front 2 feet into it and stand there, okay? A lot of horses are very claustrophobic with this, and you know, they might step a foot in and a foot out, or 2 feet in, but then not feel comfortable standing or just want to walk over it. So we'll see how she does. So what I'm going to do in the beginning is put a foot on the hoop, so that way if her foot kicks it, it's not going to send it flying, and because that tends to freak them out. So, you know, if she wanted to look at it, I would let her. I've had it sitting in here though, and she's been round pitting around it, so she already got an opportunity to check it out a little bit. If your horse hasn't seen it before, you might want to, you know, just walk them up, let them look at it, or pick it up and rub it on their side a little bit or something. But she's gotten ample opportunity to see it, and so now I'm going to ask her to step in it. You can see I've got my right foot stepped on the hoop, and I'm just going to ask a foot forward. Good. And then I'll ask her other foot. Good girl. And I'm going to want her to stand. Good girl. Good. Now I'll back her out. Well done. Good girl. Bring her front feet in again. Good. Now what I'm going to see is if she'll stand here and let me move around a little bit. Ooh. Stand. Stand. Ooh. Ooh. Good girl. Stand. Ooh. Stand. Ooh. Ooh. Stand. Good girl. The flies are really bitey today. Stand. Good girl. Ooh. Stand. And this is hard for her. She's okay with the hula hoop, but she's the one that I was saying is, you know, she can be a little bit fidgety as far as when you're moving around. She's wanting to move around with you and all of that. She doesn't want to just stand still. She wants to be constantly thinking about something or doing something. So I'm going to ask her front feet back into it. So again, this is kind of a test for you to see where your horse is at. Stand. Good girl. Good. Good girl. Ooh. Stand. Good girl. I'm going to ask that other front foot to go back in. Good. Stand. 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 Ooh. Stand. 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 Good. Stand. Stand. Good girl. Good. Now she's having to learn to take the carrot nicely because she wants to grab your whole hand. And so I use treats in training, but I insist that they take them politely. Thank you. So feet back in. Ooh, stand. 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 Ooh. Stand. Stand. And this is hard for her. She's having to learn some self-control here. Ooh. Stand. One more step. Good. Stand. Good girl. Stand. Good girl. Stand. Ooh. Stand. 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 Good girl. Good. Stand. Stand. Good girl. Good. So the hula hoop is just representing a boundary. Stand. Hoo. And she's having to stay within that boundary, and she's wanting to kind of test it out a little bit. And so, you know, like I said, it just is representative of a boundary that she's going to have to stay within. Hoo. It's like the maze. There isn't really necessarily a working purpose of the maze itself, other than the fact that it puts some pressure on them. Stand. So she may be able to back up well, but can she back up between two poles? Can she back up between poles with an L? Can she back up, you know, the whole maze and have those poles there and not be able to mess up, to do it right? And it's kind of like dressage tests. Stand. Ooh, stand. You could do 20 circles and get 1 or 2 that are really good, but when you go in and you perform a dressage test, you don't get 20 chances. You get 1 chance, and you have to do it right the first time. And that's kind of like what the maze is, and what this is. It just is extra pressure and extra boundaries to say, can you do it right when you don't have, you know, for example, like I said with the dressage circle, you don't have 20 times to practice and get 1 right and you pick that one to show the judge. Or with the maze, you know, you may have a horse that you can back in an L-ish sort of form, but if you don't have the pole set up and have that boundary where they don't have as much room to maneuver and they've got to really just step right the first time, then, you know, you're not really testing it out. Good girl. Good. So see how now she's starting to settle into it a little bit more? Ooh. Good girl. So for some horses with this exercise, it has more to do with them being afraid of the hula hoop. It's shiny or it's colorful or it moves or whatever. Stand. Good girl. But with her, it had more to do with that boundary. And some horses are very claustrophobic about it. They'll stand still all day long, but they don't want to have both feet in. It just symbolizes just this, you know, claustrophobic thing for them, being inside this box. And so for her, you know, I don't think she's not really claustrophobic with it, and she's obviously not afraid of it. It's more so just symbolizing that extra pressure and that extra boundary. Good. Stand. Good girl. Stand. Good. Stand. And she's having to figure out that she can't always just follow me around or move around as she pleases. She has to stay. Good girl. Stand. 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 Ah! There you go. Stand. Good girl. Good. Good. Stand. Stand. Good girl. Good girl. Stand. At. Good girl. Good. There you go. Ooh. Stand. Stand. Good girl. Stand. Good. And she's allowed to look, but she doesn't have to move every time I move. Good girl. Good job. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, especially since she's not afraid of it, I'm going to just let her walk through. Good girl. Good. Well done. So like I said, all of this stuff is just making the horses more maneuverable and better able to understand what you're asking of them, so that in your riding, it'll be much easier if you've already done all this prep work on the ground. They're going to understand you placing their feet in different spots, and it's going to make sense to them. So now we're going to do those same 2 exercises with Oakley, and I'm going to start at the beginning just like I did with Dora and review her maneuverability just in hand before I start putting any pressure on her. Good. Awesome job. So I'm just disengaging the hind right now. Good job. Good girl. Now I'm going to go ahead and move the front. Good. Good. And she's crossing over nicely. Good girl. Good job. Okay, now switch to the other side and do the same thing. Good. Good girl. Well done. Okay, now we'll work on our back up a little bit. Ooh. Back. Back. Good. Good girl. So now I'll ask her with me in front of her, I'll ask her to back away from me. Back. 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 Good girl. So a little bit hesitant, but she's just getting used to this whole thing. And I'm pretty pleased with how quickly she responded to knowing what the cue meant. She wasn't totally sure how many steps back, but as we keep working on it, she'll build her confidence, and you can have horses that'll, you know, back the whole round pin away from you. Good girl. So that was a pretty good response. So now I'm just going to back her up from the top of the nose, ask for a step or 2 backwards, and then turn her head and move the hind. Okay, just like what I did with Dora. I'm just going to hold and put pressure in and wait. Good girl. Good. Now I'm going to tip her head. Good. Well done. Good. And then I'll tip her head and see if she'll move the hind. So she's moving the front, but she's not wanting to move the hind yet, so I'm just going to stay with her. I'm going to ask her to go a couple steps back again because she's kind of locking up on me. Good. See how she's wanting to lock up? So I'm going to ask her for a couple steps back again. Good. There, she's starting to get it, but she's not crossing over yet. So I'm going to stay with her. There. She's getting close. There you go. Good girl. Good. So I'm going to walk her forward and do the same thing on that side again, because I'd like her, you know, when we get into the maze, there's a lot more pressure on her, and she's not going to have as much room to maneuver around and figure out what I want. So I'd like her to be a little bit clearer. I'm going to go ahead and actually bend her around a little bit more, just because I think her neck's getting in the way a little bit. There you go. Good girl. Because of how she was tossing her head and stuff, I'm just going to loosen her up a little bit. Good girl. Okay, now I'm going to ask again for her to back up a little bit better. Good. And then I'll tip her head. Okay, she got the hind. There she goes. Much better. Good girl. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead into the maze, and same thing like what I did with Dora. I'm just gonna walk in, stop, turn, and walk out, and stop. And the reason that I stop at each turn is because otherwise they want to just rush through it. And so I walk them through ones where I stop at each turn, because when you back them through, they're going to have to stop at each turn and think about what they're doing and let you position them so they can continue with the back out. So I get them in that habit when I first walk them in the first time to stop at each corner. Who? Good girl. Who? Good. All done. So this time we'll just back up just straight the chute. Good girl. Good. Good girl. Okay, now we'll do the L. Now I like her to stay up here next to me. Ooh. Well done. Back. Good. Good. Okay, so now I'm going to have to turn her hind end around. And she's wanting to just back up, so I'm going to have her come forward a little because she's hitting that pole. And she's going to have to figure out that she needs to let me maneuver her. Good. Good girl. And I'm actually going to, even though she's straightened up, I really wanted that hind to move. There, good girl. So I'm gonna, sometimes like that, even though she did straighten up, I'm gonna keep on the fact that I was asking for the hind. I wasn't really giving her a cue to move the front. So she may have accomplished it, but she wasn't really doing what I was asking. So I stayed with her until I got that step from the hind. Good girl. Back. And if she feels a little bit sticky, then I can bump with my whip a little. Good. Good girl. Good. Good girl. Good. Good. One more step. Good. There you go. And so I just stay steady with her, because do you see how she's going to toss her head a little bit? I just stay steady with that pressure, and I don't give to her just because she tosses her head, and then she'll learn that it really doesn't get her anywhere. There you go, a little too much. There you go. Good. Okay, now I want that hind to move. I'm really not asking for the front. Perfect. Good girl. Good. Well done. Much better response that time. Now I'll just move the front over just a little step just to straighten her up the rest of the way. Good girl. And then I'll ask her to back up. Good. And when I back on top of the nose, I'm going to push in and then release a little bit every time she steps. So I release a little, press in, release a little, press in. And even though we're out of the maze, she's being really heavy on me. There she goes. Good girl. And I'm going to stay with her though until she can drop her head down and take a couple steps backwards. And I'm just rocking her a little bit so she'll relax her head down. And then I'm going to press in And I want her to lighten up. Good, good, good. That was better. Good girl. Because if you hold, you're holding steady, but if you just push in and don't give any sort of release, then they're going to shut down on you. So it's just a push and a little release, and a push in and a little release. So now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to change, I'm going to change sides. And we're going to go ahead and do it the other way. And you can do this, what I did with Dora and what I'm doing with her is I'm on the inside, but you could do this from the outside as well. Good girl. Where the horse is having to turn away from you. Good girl. Good. And I want her to stay up here next to my shoulder. Ooh, good girl. And I'm actually going to have her come forward again because I really didn't ask her to back up yet. She was kind of assuming. And she's not really in a very good position because her hind end is about to hit that pole. So I'm going to have her just stand here for just a sec. And I'm going to bring her forward a little bit more. There she goes. And she straightened up a little bit. Yep, that foot too. Good. Good. Good girl. Okay, so now I'm going to tip her nose slightly away from me and ask her to back up. Good girl. Good. And I'm going to hold until she'll move her hind, because see how she's backing crooked? Good. Great job. Good girl. Now we'll go ahead and do the L. Ooh. Good girl. So just back up a couple of steps, and then she's going to have to stop and wait for my direction. She's wanting to jump ahead a little bit, but it's not going to do her any good. There you go. Good girl. Great job. Now move her front over a little bit. Good. It's a little bit delayed on the response for her front end. Good. Good. And I'm going to ask again for that hind end to move over and have her straighten up again because she's wanting to back up crooked. And she's getting a little bit locked up in her neck again where she's wanting to toss her head. So I'm just going to hold her and stay with her until she can relax into it. There you go. There. Okay, so but I'm going to ask that hind end. And remember, I give a little release on every step. But I want her to back up relaxed and not be tossing her head or pushing on me. And decently straight. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight, but not swinging out to the other side completely. Better. So she kind of softened up there. I know you couldn't see it from the angle that the camera is, but she actually kind of softened into it and not wanting to push on my hand so much. So now we'll go through the rest of the maze. And again, like I said when I was working with Dora, these exercises, they're just tests. So I'm just going to straighten these poles up a little bit. Good girl. Who? Good girl. Good, well done. Good. Okay, now I'm going to ask her to move her hind. Good girl. Good. Now she's going to have to move her front a little bit. Good. One more step. Good girl. Well done. Good. 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 And then I'll move her hind the rest of the way and straighten her back out. Good. Good girl. Good. She's getting a little sticky again, so I'm just going to stay with her until she can soften. Good. Did you step on something, silly? So now I'm going to back her up again and make her straighten out again and release on a good note, so whatever startled her. Because you don't want them to associate, if they startle at something else, you don't want them to associate that with what you were just doing. So you always repeat. And I'm just going to wait until she can soften to it a little bit. And if your horse can't do this, then you're not going to be able to teach him to soften to the bit very well. It's the same thing. Good. Good. So she's doing it, but she still is putting a lot of pressure on me. Good. So I'm just going to hold and wait. And I do the little push and release with each step. Back. Back. There you go. Good girl. Good. And this is hard work for her. Good. Better. Good. Good girl. So now we'll go ahead and move on to the hula hoop, and that's something, the backing up with her is something that we're going to have to keep working on. It's not really bad, definitely not. She's pretty responsive, but she does get kind of locked up and want to shut down some. Good girl. So just like I did with Dora, I'm going to step on it in the beginning. Good. Good girl. Not bad at all. Good girl. Good. Good. Okay, now I'm going to have her back out. Good. Well done. Good girl. Good. Okay, now I'm going to start to move around a little bit and see if she'll stand. 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 So I'm just going to move her over a little. Stand. Ooh. Stand. Stand. One more step. Good. Good girl. Stand. Stand. Ooh. Good girl. Good. Ooh. Ooh. One more step. There you go. Good girl. Ooh. Ooh. Stand. Stand. Ooh. Good. Good girl. Stand. Stand. There you go. Stand. Ooh. 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 Stand. Stand. Good girl. Good. Good girl. Stand. Ooh. Good. Stand. Ooh. Good girl. Stand. 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 Ooh. Ooh. Stand. Ooh. Good girl. Stand. 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 Ooh. Good girl. Come forward. Nope. So she's wanting to go around it, so I'm using the whip as a barrier to not let her go around it. Good girl. Good girl. Stand. Shh. Good. Stand. Ooh. Good. Stand. Good. Much better. Good girl. Stand. 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 Hat. Good girl. Stand. Good. So you can tell she's wanting so bad. She's about ready to move, but she's kind of listening to my cues and not. Good girl. A little too much. Good. Nope, too much. Right there. Good. Good girl. Stand. 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 Ooh. Stand. Good girl. Good. So just like Dora, she's not afraid of the hula hoop, but she's having to learn a little bit of self-control to just stand still while I'm moving all around her. Good girl. Stand. Stand. Ooh. Stand. Good girl. Good. Stand. Good girl. Stand. Ooh. Ooh. And I'm just going to keep doing this until she can stand still. Ooh. Square up. Ooh. Stand. 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 Ooh. It really is a lost skill that a lot of horses now don't know how to just stand still. And people don't really realize that their horse won't stand still until they're at a clinic or a show or something. And the horse is actually being asked to stand still. Stand. And the horse, some horses will just fiddle around a little. Other horses will have a complete meltdown. And they just can't handle it. And so again, it really is an important skill that the horses need to learn to just stand. And like I talked about with Dora, the hula hoop, it just is a boundary. It just is symbolizing a boundary. Good, much better. Good. Good, much better. Hoop. Good. Good. Stand. 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 Good girl. Stand. Much better. Stand. Good. So she's getting the idea. Good. And this is one exercise that you can use. There are lots of ways to teach a horse to ground tie, but this is one way you can do it. Much better. Stand. Ooh. 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 Stand. Nope. Stand. And most people don't do these kinds of exercises asking their horses to stand still because the person doesn't have the patience for it. So if you don't have that level of patience, then you sure as heck shouldn't be expecting your horse to have that much patience. Ooh. Ooh. Especially like these young horses, they don't have the attention span. So if she can stand for me, and I can walk back and forth a few times, then I'll give her a carrot and let her be done with this exercise for today. Good girl. Ooh. Good. Well done. Good. So I'll go ahead and walk her through it because she's not afraid of it. If you have a horse that's really touchy about the hoop itself, then you would want to put your foot on it and back them out. But neither one of these guys were afraid of it. It was just a matter of building up their patience and teaching them just to stand. Even though I'm moving around, that they can stand still. And they don't always have to feel like just because I'm moving, they're moving as well. And so, you know, I like there to be a good distinction. If I want my horse to move with me, then I'll ask them to and they should stay with me. But if I want my horse to stand and just stay there, like when I'm grooming, I can't stand it when a horse is fidgeting around. Whether they're tied or they're ground tied or we're out in the pasture, it shouldn't matter. If I'm grooming my horse, they should just stand. So, you know, this is one of the exercises, like I said, for you can teach a horse to ground tie and just teach them just to settle into where they're at and relax and not worry about you moving around them.